even when communication is difficult and there are hard things to say, it's better to do that and work through them than stuffing it and letting it fester, because eventually that frustration or that issue will come out in some way.
Thank you for joining us for the Blended Kingdom Families podcast. This podcast is for blended families, the people who love them, and anyone who just wants to improve their marriage and family relationships.
BKF exists to break the cycle of divorce, equip marriages, and unite blended families with the truth of God's Word. It is our hope that today you will receive biblical guidance and practical resources that will bring unity and peace to create your thriving, healthy home. Let's jump in.
Hey guys, Scott and Vanessa with Blended Kingdom Families. We are so excited that you're here with us today, and we have an amazing guest with us, Andrea Fortenberry. It is great to have you, and we only wish you were here in studio with us, but we will take you via Zoom as well.
Yes, thank you guys so much for having me on. I'm really excited to be here via Zoom.
Well, awesome. Well, you guys, I just want to share a little bit about Andrea with you and just who she is, what she does. She is an author, a speaker, a Bible teacher, podcast host, and executive leadership coach. She's also, wife and mama as well, which is most important. She's been married for 16 years to her husband, Will, and they have 2 children together. 16 years, that is a long time, Andrea.
Yeah, next month is 17, so it is really crazy. We got married right out of college, so.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations on number 17 coming up. But Andrea, she is not in a blended family, but she has family members who are in blended families. She hosts the Perfectionist Guide to Mothering, a podcast that equips moms to find freedom from perfectionism and show up for the life God has for them. And then she's also involved with MOPS, where she is on staff there as she encourages and supports and coordinates across the country with that organization. So, Andrea, thank you so much for being with us today, and we're just so excited to dive into today's topic.
Yeah, I love it.
I was going to say thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to share today.
Well, on top of everything that we just talked about, we're going to give you an opportunity just to introduce yourself a little bit deeper. Tell us a little bit more about your family, anything that's on your heart to share with the audience.
Sure. So I am a resident of Arizona. We live out in Phoenix, and we've been here for about 15 years. So we love it here, even though it's super crazy hot. It's summer right now. My kids are out of school. So I have a daughter who is 12 and a son who is 9. So we are in the middle years of parenting, and every season has its blessings and challenges. And so we're kind of navigating this new season of being middle parents, and it's been fun. I love ministering to families and encouraging parents. I have found in my own journey that God has taught me so much through being a mom and through being a wife, and He has used those opportunities, those roles in my life to teach me so many things. And I love being able to, in turn, pour that encouragement out into others.
That's awesome.
Aw, I love that. That is so good. Well, can you tell us a little bit more about your podcast for those who are listening and watching, and, just what it's about and kind of your heart behind starting that, Andrea?
Sure. So when I became a mom, I had this expectation that I was going to be the perfect mom. And I had lots of expectations of what my children would be like. And I was very surprised when we had a daughter, because I thought, okay, she's going to be just like I was and like I am. She's going to be calm. She's going to be passive. And I turned out to have this daughter who's very strong-willed, and she's very different than I am. And then we had our son, and I just found myself very frustrated by the fact that I was not a perfect mom, and that my kids made messes, that they didn't always listen to what I asked them to do. And so it really was a struggle for me, but the Lord really helped me through some biblical counseling that I finally decided I needed to pursue. And through that process, He really helped me to understand why I cling to perfectionism and why I use that. It's really a coping mechanism in our lives, that we try to control things. We try to make things perfect. And so God used my kids as the catalyst to seek some healing for that and some help. And it's been a journey and I've learned so much. And so I really just have a heart to be able to reach moms who are now where I was in that place of struggling with expectations, struggling with not being able to do all the things that maybe culture tells us that we should do to be the perfect mom. And I really just hope to encourage moms and to let them know there's no such thing as being a perfect mom, but you can be a good one with God's help.
Man, that's so good. I love that. That is such a beautiful mission, because I know that there has to be, whether you're a stepmom, bio mom, mom, that struggles with that. And man, I love that you have that resource for them. And oftentimes when we can speak out of our own brokenness and the things that we've struggled with, it can be that hope and encouragement for people who are going through that very same thing. So that's awesome. Love that.
Yeah, one of the questions that I have, and maybe I don't relate to this biologically, because I know moms, you guys have a whole subset of pressures that the husbands just don't. I don't know the way to say that. I know husbands are out there, you'll agree with me. And I know Vanessa, you'd be like, yeah, I understand. You just don't worry about that. So here's my question from the guy's perspective, just so we can identify when a problem exists. Is I think there's a healthy expectation of just being a good parent. Let me just do good things. Let me try not to yell at my kids too much. Let's teach them how to brush their teeth. My question is when does it become unhealthy? At what point do you feel, and you talk to moms and you're like, okay, that expectation has become unhealthy? What would you say to that?
That's such a good question. I think that really when we think about when shame enters the equation, that's when it's gone too far. So for, the moms, parents, when we have made a mistake or we're wrestling through something that, maybe we let our kids down, or we yelled at them, we didn't handle discipline in the right way, we let our emotions get the best of us. When that happens, do we shame ourselves? Do we beat ourselves up about making that mistake, not knowing better? All those sorts of things, just those negative thoughts that are in our head, if they are shameful and get us stuck, I think that's the point where we need to say, okay, something's wrong here. Because there are times where maybe, we bounce back, like, I made a mistake with that. We ask our kids for forgiveness and we bounce back and move forward in grace. That really is the goal. But when we get stuck in that shame, or when sometimes as parents, we don't like to admit this, but sometimes we do end up shaming others as well. So maybe that's shaming our kids, like, you should have known better, or, you were bad when you did this, or things like that. Or we even do that to our spouse or to other relationships that we have. So I think it's when shame enters, we see that as a habitual pattern, that is a big sign that it's gone too far, that something's not right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. Well, we're kind of going off of the expectations, Andrea, and I know you speak to this a lot, and it's just, expectations in marriage and addressing this and communication.
I laugh about that because it's so funny when people are like, this is the marriage I will have.
Yeah.
And then you're like, yeah, no, that's not going to happen.
Well, it's like children, You're like, oh yeah, my marriage is going to be perfect, just like my child. And then it's like, your marriage is this wild and crazy child that's,
Am I the child?
I don't know,
I don't know who's the child in that group. But we would love for you to talk about just addressing expectations in marriage. Again, I know a lot of our listeners are, sometimes they're either preparing to blend their family and they're really tuned in to trying to do that correctly. And a lot of that focus is on the children's relationship, especially in that blended family dynamic. And a lot of our listeners are newly married. So expectations are huge right now. So talk to us about addressing expectations in marriage.
Sure. I'll share a story from personal experience. So my husband and I had been married about 5 years, and we went to a marriage counselor to just, talk through some things that come up. And we were sitting in her office, and I don't know about listeners who are listening, but I had this bad habit of when something was bothering me, instead of telling my husband that something was wrong, I would just kind of be a little passive aggressive and a little bit, letting him know through my body language or my tone of voice that I was bothered. So I would want him to ask me what was wrong. But then when he would ask me what was wrong, I would say nothing, because I wanted him to keep asking and keep probing, and then we would have this talk session. That was my expectation. So we were talking this out with a counselor, and she looked at me and said, when you say to your husband that nothing is wrong and something is wrong, you're actually lying to him. And that was a huge eye opener to me, because I thought, that's not true. But when you really think about it, it is not being truthful. And so I was so grateful that she pointed that out to me. And it made me realize that even when communication is difficult and there are hard things to say, it's better to do that and work through them than stuffing it and letting it fester, because eventually that frustration or that issue will come out in some way. Maybe it's 2 months from now when something else happens that we're keeping track of along the way. So that communication piece is really, really important. And then I think it also just, expectations that we have for each other, we need to analyze those and think, okay, I think pastor one time say, don't have any expectations of your spouse at all whatsoever. And I thought, in theory, that sounds great. But I think just as humans, we do have some expectations sometimes of like, okay, this is your chore, this is my chore, this is your role, this is my role. So I don't know that we can, get those expectations down to zero. But what I think is helpful is to analyze, is this a realistic expectation? And going back to me expecting my husband to read my mind and want him to ask me over and over, that's not a realistic expectation to have of somebody. Only God can read our minds. So removing that expectation from him really was helpful. And it helps when we do that with our kids and other relationships too.
Absolutely.
Can I just say amen? Like, men cannot read minds. I am 100% convinced that is the case. I do know that. That's awesome.
That is the truth, yeah.
We're shaking our heads in marriage because the expectation question is always so fun.
Right. Love it.
And again, I just want to encourage those people who are listening. We have to learn to be married. This is an art. This is a practice. You don't 100% know your spouse. You need to get to know each other through time. I love what you said about, hey, we went to counseling. A lot of couples miss that step and just continue along in that rut, and they don't get help. So when you see something, even small stuff comes up, it's always good to go see a counselor, and you may get that eye-opening piece of information that you're like, hey, when I say nothing, I'm lying, because there is something. So I love that you said that, and definitely would agree with that advice.
Yeah. Well, and Andrea, for someone who's listening that maybe struggle, like, I don't know how to take expectations off of my spouse or even their children or members of their family, how can one release expectations and embrace what is in their marriage and in their family? What are some steps? Yeah,
that's a great question. Again, like I said, I think if we can lower our expectations, try to get them down as close to zero as we can, that is helpful. And I've learned to replace the word expectations with the word expectancy. So they sound the same, but they have different meanings. So expectation is like, this is what I want you to do for me. This is what, in my mind, this is who you are. This is what you do. But expectancy really is a heart that is open and willing to accept what is, instead of maybe what you are trying to control or what you're wanting. So think, in marriage, if you are expecting your spouse to, keep your house clean all the time, do all the errands or cooking or, whatever those things are, instead of taking note when they don't happen, maybe instead you can lower those expectations and then get excited for what does happen, or be grateful for what those things that your spouse does do for you or that your kids do, and just have a heart that's open to embrace your reality versus this world of expectations that we create in our own head.
No, that's so good.
Yeah, I love that. And I would just add one more thing. One of the things that I love to think about, especially in marriage, these day-to-day expectations, they really do add up. They really do.
Yeah.
I would love to be in a world where my marriage expectations were really, low. But it's just not the case. I mean, I think of so much of Vanessa, and I know her capabilities are high, so my expectations are high sometimes. The one thing that I think about a lot, especially if I'm frustrated, is that, just see your spouse the way God sees them. Mm-hmm. Again, God looks at us with a pure lens of love. And if I can visualize that and just look at Vanessa that way and go, you know what, God loves her, I love her, she may not be having the best day, or it may not have met my expectations, but let's just choose that way. I think that's another thing couples can do, just to kind of get them through day to day.
Well, and then just, like you said, embracing who they are. Like, you're just weird sometimes. I love you, but you're just weird. So it's just like, okay, Lord, like, that's how you made him, and that's how you made Vanessa. That's how, you made Scott. And just embracing, this is who they are, not trying to change them in a way that's altering, the identity or how God created them to be, and continue to design them into the person that He's created them to be. But someone that's encouraging and lifts them up.
Can I express my weirdness here for a second?
Sure.
So I love this idea of embracing imperfection. Do we all remember the first time we got a car? Like our first car? It wasn't impressive, but it was ours. And we embraced that concept. I love that, having a husband and wife, they may not be perfect and you may not have met every expectations, mm-hmm. but they're yours. Mm-hmm. And just hold them close and understand that that's what God's provided for you. They have everything you need. Mm-hmm. You have everything they need. But you just have to embrace that. That's my weirdness coming out.
Yeah, I love that. One thing to add that I wrote an article recently about this dynamic between spouses and about how sometimes we can complain about our spouse and things that they do that maybe is annoying. So maybe you have a spouse that talks a lot and you start to complain about that. Could we turn that into a compliment and see, that you love that your spouse shares so much with you, and think about that positively versus, thinking of it negatively. So just like you're saying, none of us are perfect. The only perfect person, that's ever walked the earth was Jesus. So we need to realize that about our spouse, about our kids, other people, and then embrace the things about them that you love. But then also, even those quirky things, even those things that get on your nerves, try to see them for what they are, a positive light. You can laugh about them, because when we turn it around to us, we want our spouses to still love us and give us grace despite our imperfections or the things that we do that get on their nerves. It goes both ways.
Absolutely. Well, Andrea, if you had a blended family sitting in front of you right now, given the ministry and, that's a lot of the people who are listening and watching, what big nugget of advice or wisdom or just encouragement or hope that would you just want to instill to them or just empower them with?
Oh, great question. I think it would be to seek God's wisdom as you are blending your family, as there are so many different personality dynamics, and you have multiple sets of parents and those things. I think just keep seeking God's wisdom. And I love James chapter 1, verses 2-5, and it talks about to consider it joy when we face trials. And I know that in blended family situations, there are just some of those trials that are unique to blended families, and that can be discouraging and disheartening sometimes. But God grows us through those trials, and as we learn to persevere and become mature, God's doing a work in us. And then I love, and I think it's verse 5 of that chapter, that God talks about we can always ask Him for wisdom and He will give it to us. So I would say just seek wisdom for all of those different dynamics that you work through in a blended family.
Oh, that's so good. I love that.
It's so good. Well, our last question that we always ask is the name of our ministry, Blended Kingdom Families. What is a blended kingdom family to you?
I love that question as well. I was thinking about how all families really are blended families. And as we are raising our families to seek God, to glorify God, to keep the kingdom in mind, that really is what came to mind. And I even was thinking about the church overall. Like, we are a big blended family who is seeking God, trying to do the best we can to tell others about Jesus and live out lives of faith. So I think it's that, putting God first, as we have different, dynamics of personalities and people in our families, and just trying to glorify God through the process of doing life together.
Oh, that's so awesome. That's so
Sweet.
beautiful. I love that. Well, Andrea, can you tell our audience and listeners where they can find you, follow you, website, any of your social handles?
Absolutely. So the podcast, first of all, is the Perfectionist Guide to Mothering. So wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google, it's there. You'll be able to find it. I'm on Instagram at Andrea Fortenberry. And then my website is andreafortenberry.com.
Awesome.
That is so much fun. Well, we are just so honored and humbled to have you here with us today. We love that we brought some light to this topic. I hope that it was encouraging to the listeners and watchers.
Yes.
I know that we picked up a lot of stuff from it. So thank you for being here with us, Andrea, and we are just excited to see what God's going to do through your ministry and podcast.
Yes. And you guys, if you have not already left us a review on our iTunes or Apple Podcasts, any podcast platform, we just want to encourage you to do so. We love hearing back from you and your feedback. It's so encouraging. And I know families who look up the podcast and read it are encouraged as well. So I want to read this from Empowered, Enriched, and Encouraged. Well, it says Empowered, Enriched, Encouraged, and they gave 5 stars. Thank you.
Boom.
Boom. It said, I woke up this morning ready to throw in the towel in any direction I could. I looked for encouragement in the form of podcasts and stumbled across this one. 2 episodes in, and I'm more than prepared to continue on my journey. Thank you for this. So again, you guys, I mean, it just continues to bring encouragement to people, and we're just so honored and just give God all the glory for that. So if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, do that so you don't miss a notification every week when the podcast comes out.
Guys, hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Be blessed in all that you do.
Take care.
Hey guys, so glad you were here with us today, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode.
And you can find more resources from Blended Kingdom Families at blendedkingdomfamilies.com. Join us again next time as we hang out with more amazing podcast guests. And remember, nothing will be impossible with God.